Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to the July version of this Men's Room webinar. And I am here once again with the wonderfully talented Mr. Mark Sparks.
Good day, good day.
And we have a special guest on the call this month, Mr. Frank B Kermit.
How are you all doing?
Hey, Frank. Hey.
Very good, Frank. Very good. We're happy that you could join us today.
So am I, actually. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So we've got some time here, and let's get right into it. One of the things I wanted to start with is something that you've touched on before, Frank, and that's the idea of building your seduction persona. Can you tell us a little bit about what that kind of means to you?
Okay. I come from a background, I have a bachelor's degree in the field of communication studies. I have a minor and specialization in theater, and within that minor and specialization, I did drama therapy. And I borrowed a lot of the tactics and techniques I used there to perform a specific type of character in building a seduction persona. A lot of times we talk about adopting a new belief or trying a new behavior. I broke it down to specific behaviors in certain contexts. So all of building a seduction persona is the creation of a character that embodies all the good things about yourself that you want to keep and all the new behaviors and beliefs that you want to instill in yourself. It's very difficult to start just behaving in a new manner when you fall into the same repeating behavior patterns. And building a seduction persona, the process that I teach, is designed to help you do just that. Instill new behavior patterns to break the old behavior patterns and instill new beliefs into your psyche.
So it seems like it's kind of along the lines of modeling, picking somebody that you admire, that you look up to, somebody that possesses the traits that you want, or even if that's a fictional person, and then downloading that into yourself.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty accurate description.
So how does one go about that? I mean, obviously, you know, it's pretty obvious when you look out and you see somebody who's good with women and who's good socially, and you can say, well, I really like this about them. So how do you actually take that? How do you linguistically structure that? And then how do you install that into your own persona? Okay,
there's a chart that I encourage all of my students to draw up. And if you buy my book, I'm a Man, That's My Job, it's all in there. There's a starter chart for you. In the first column of the chart, you have to write down either the situation you're in or the belief that it is that you want to modify or challenge. In the second column of the chart, you have to write down what it is you currently do in that situation. And in the third column of the chart is where you will include a new behavior to experiment with, or if you really believe that what you're already doing or what you're already believing actually has merit and you want to keep it, in the third column you'll just rewrite what's in the second column. So we're going to use some very specific examples here because right now it's all theory. Let's get this concrete. Grab a pen and paper out there. Sit down, and on that paper, you're going to divide it up into 3 columns. In the first column, you're going to write up a situation. Going to a wedding. That'll be your first situation. Now, in the second column, write down behaviors that you currently do when you go to a wedding. Well, the thing that I wrote down in that column is, I'm always sitting down alone, trying to find something to keep me busy while everybody else is dancing. That's a particular behavior in a particular situation that I was not happy with. In terms of what can I do instead, that's the third column. This is where you start playing with new behavior ideas. This is where you start coming up with new belief systems. And the different belief systems or the different behaviors I included there was, okay, find somebody and learn palmistry and read someone's palm at the wedding reception, see what happens. Mm-hmm. I did that for a while. I got some great attention, but I didn't get any dates, and I didn't get any girlfriends. I still wasn't enjoying myself because I ended up being used as the palmistry guy at parties. So I tried a different behavior, and the new behavior was learn to dance and dance at the wedding. So I went, took a bunch of dance courses, learned how to do some very basic the waltz, the tango, and whatnot. When I went to the dance school, I said, I want to learn how to dance so that I don't have to sit down at weddings. And that was the scope of my lessons. Took lessons for a number of months. And then finally it happened that I was invited to a wedding. And I turned to my date and I say, okay, come on, let's go dance. And my date didn't want to dance with me. So I said, fine, you don't want to dance with me? I'm going to go ask some other girl to dance with me. She says, fine, I don't want to dance. Okay, I ended up asking 6 other women to dance with me. They all said, no, not now. I don't really feel comfortable. Let's wait till later in the night. I finally found the 7th woman to ask to dance. She was a professional dance instructor. She had gone out with one of my friends, and I wasn't looking to, make her my girlfriend, wasn't worried about making my lover. I have some boundaries about that if she's dated one of my friends. So my attitude with her was, hey, let's just dance, okay? She was open to it. We got onto the dance floor. By that point, I had danced with her, and I'm still not a great dancer at this point, but I danced enough that everybody in the hall ended up staring at us, having fun. One of my other friends grabbed a flower from one of the wedding table arrangements in the middle of the table. He grabbed the flower right onto the dance floor, put it in my mouth. I just figured, okay, let's have some fun. Let's go with this. I felt ridiculous, but I didn't care. We were dancing. We were having a great time. We did I think we did the waltz and then a tango, or was a tango, then a waltz, whatever. After that, and after everybody had gotten a good glimpse of what I could do, every single girl, except for the girl that I had brought there as my date, came up to me and said, Frank, later on, please ask me to dance.
That's a great story, Frank. There's so many cool things to pull out of this.
Yeah.
A couple things just that I've been writing down here that kind of sprung out at me that I think are important. One, when you made the decision to change the new behavior, and for you that was to learn how to dance, that was a long-term commitment. That was something that you actually went and you took lessons. You spent quite a bit of time doing that. And obviously, I'm sure there were times where you wanted to quit, or the times you didn't think it was worth it. And then even once you learned how to dance, you still had to wait for the next wedding before you could kind of put, what you'd learned in action. And so just having that ability to stick with it for such a long term with not even proven results at the end of it that you know of, I thought that was really cool. The other thing that was great about that story was your persistence. I mean, to be shot down or, declined by 6 women, and then the 7th one, happens to be a dancer, and she says yes, and it makes the whole night. I mean, it just kind of goes to show you that sometimes it is really just a numbers game, and sometimes you really just need to pick yourself up and just to keep going. And, at the end, it kind of can turn everything around. So I think there's a really valuable lesson there as well. And just having the confidence to keep going, to keep asking, to keep with it, and not caring what people think, not caring if people judge you on how you dance. And I think that us as human beings, we really admire and respect and look up to people that are able to, as the saying goes, dance like no one's watching, and just be themselves and sort of let their true persona out, and not have to worry about hiding behind this sort of mask, this social mask that we put up.
Yeah.
So a lot of really great stuff coming just out of that exercise alone. So what was, I guess, Frank, in terms of packaging that all together, what was it that kept you motivated going through that whole process?
Wow, that's first of all, I appreciate all the comments, but you got to understand that I didn't see this process as something that was, okay, well, I'm just going to do this for a few years and then I'm going to forget about it. I was really looking to change my life and all aspects of my life.
And that's huge.
In terms of what kept me motivated, well, the thing that kept me motivated was that I went 5 years with no sex. I was trying to get my ex-fiance back. I was miserable. I was suicidal. Mm-hmm. The night that I decided that I was going to, make this my number one priority in my life, ahead of school, ahead of work, ahead of everything else. That was the night where I was looked to my uncle's shotguns in his garage, because we all live in the same duplex. For those of you who don't know, a duplex is where you have one family on the top floor, one family on the bottom floor, and you share the basement. So my uncle had some hunting rifles in the basement, and I was looking at them thinking, okay, how could I get the hunting rifle and blow my own brains out? Because I was so miserable with my life.
It's really so amazing how much leverage you can get on yourself when you're in pain and when you're moving away from something that you don't want. It's quite compelling.
If you decide to, though, and that's that we always talk about that, is people kind of they use pain as a crutch and sit in it, or you use pain as a catalyst to move you forward, right?
That's it.
You got to remember, though, that the mindset that I had at the time wasn't that, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show them all and I'm going to get 100 women by the end of the year. My mindset was, figure this out or you die.
Exactly. You change and that's powerful versus I don't want to figure this out and I'm going to sit in this and wallow in my sadness for the rest of my life.
The other thing I want to add into this, and I know this is going to sound like a real oxymoron in this, but the fact that I'm overweight actually turned out to be an advantage. And, when you said that not having people judge me and being afraid of that, people are going to judge you no matter what. Whether you do something or whether you don't do something, somebody's going to pass a judgment. Being an overweight guy for most of my life, I've been on the receiving end of hatred for the majority of my life. So, you said, wow, how did you persevere and ask out 6 girls and have them say no before you got to the 7th one? Dude, as an overweight guy, I get rejected by all kinds of people on a regular basis. The one night in Toronto that really solidifies this, I had gone out to a restaurant with a number of my students. And outside of the restaurant, after the meal was over, it was about maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I had about maybe 10 of my students with me. I'm crossing the street. A car drives by. There's about 4 women in the car, and they start yelling out obscenities at me for being overweight. And I had told my students, well, yeah, being a big guy means you're going to have people hate you and taunt you, and you have strangers. And some of them didn't believe me. And there I was, crossing the street, car goes by, they start yelling something at me, and I just look at my students and I just point to the car and I say, now do you believe me? And the timing of it couldn't have been any better. But you got to understand, no matter what you are, white, black, tall, short, fat, skinny, everybody's making a judgment about you all the time. Sometimes you're lucky and the judgments are favorable. Sometimes the judgments are not favorable. The bottom line is, you're going to have to go ahead and make your own life anyway, because 10 years from now, even the closest friends you have won't be a factor in your life.
Well, and I think the point of that, too, as we relate it back to women, is that there really is somebody out there for everyone, and we all suffer from our own internal, our own issues, and for some people it may be overweight, other people think that they're, not good looking as society would dictate it, and so there's no effort, there's no try, there's just sort of this following in whatever you consider your disability to be. And I think what you've done, Frank, is, even being overweight, you've proven that you can get positive results, you can get positive feedback, and you can enjoy yourself. And that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily matter what you look like.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's be clear. I mean, I don't want to start presenting a false hope. Your looks, your physical appearance, your handsomeness level, it does factor in. There are going to be people who, no matter how good your game is, if they don't like your look, they just don't like your look. And then there's those people who really don't care about what you look like. They want something more intangible from you. It's that middle group of people that probably wouldn't give you a second thought based on your looks, but then once you open your mouth, they're much more open to the possibility. And they had to say that looks don't matter. I'm telling you, somebody who lives this, yeah, looks do matter. They're not the only thing. It just means that there's got to be some people that you're simply never going to be able to connect with. Just like there's going to be a lot of people who maybe at first say, I don't know about this guy. Oh, but listen to him talk. Mm-hmm. Look at the way he communicates. Look at the way, he makes me feel very good about myself. He makes me feel very good about this interaction. Mm-hmm. Now, am I the type of guy that as soon as I walk through a door, women say, oh my God, there's Frank. I want to spread my legs for him. It doesn't happen. No woman has ever looked at me and said, ooh, Frank, I want to fuck that. Most women look at me and say, what, Frank? Fuck that.
But Frank, you've been with your fair share of women, have you not?
I've been with a few. It's you got to understand, though, that even some of the women who I ended up being with one of them was a real nasty one. She used to regularly tell me stuff like, I don't even know I am with you. I'm not even attracted to you. She came over every Friday night to my place to get to get her cock cleaned out. You got to understand, looks will play a factor in it. You have to have a near perfect game, because the way I teach the guys is to say this: you have a certain margin of error in every interaction you go into. You have a certain margin of error. If the person already likes you, if the person likes your look, likes something about the environment that you're in, if you happen to what's called passive value, if you have a lot of passive value, if you look like you have the money, or you look like you have something that person already digs, you have a higher margin of error. And if you make a mistake along the way, or you say something unattractive or whatnot, it's forgiven. However, if you walk in and there's already something that they don't like about you, you have a lower margin of error. That means that the slightest mistake could turn them right off from you. And this is not just in game. This is not just in pickup or seduction or relationships. This is in all areas of life. Everything from coworkers to job situations to, family members, whatever the case.
And
Go ahead.
I was going to jump in and say, I'm Mark. I know you're a big advocate of keeping your temple, in good shape, and the difference that it has not only on your physical appearance but also on your inner confidence and your inner knowing. Do you want to touch on that?
I mean, I'll tell you, I take a lot of, a lot of guys will come at me about some of the things that I say about the body, and I mean, simply put, is you give yourself an advantage, and anytime you can give yourself an advantage in life, why wouldn't you? And that's all. That's it. And when you discipline your body, or when you go to the gym, or when you do whatever, anybody who works out at any level, and I don't mean the gym necessarily, and I say gym just because it's the easiest thing, but you play a sport, you run around, you jog, you ride your bike, you go for walks, whatever it is, where you discipline yourself, you teach yourself that when I say I'm going to do something, I can do it. It's just one of the ways that physically you can see discipline working for you. And, Frank has been awesome enough to share with us, some of the stories of his own life. And I went through my fair share of stuff coming up through high school in my first few years of my first year of college, where, I was very scrawny, and because of that, I was pegged a certain way, and I was dealt with a very certain way, and I had to work very hard to not be looked at in a certain way. And what I found very quickly was, once I changed my physical appearance, which was pretty easy because all it took was some sort of, some frequency, some focus, and some intensity. And once that happened, people started to look at me in a different way. And like Frank said, my margin of error in all things in life became very much, I had a much bigger cushion to play with. And whether it was selling, whether it was selling any product or myself, and whether that be to a woman, or whether that be for a job or to get into a school, it became easier because my margin of error was bigger. So I had a lot more room to play with. And simply put, I mean, physical fitness allows you to, it gives you an advantage in that sense, and where it does increase your margin of error, which does decrease the amount of stress that you'll have, especially as, you're talking about going and talking to women, and guys already have all these, we all have these anxieties, and we already have all these, what if she says, what if she's, if you can avoid some one or two of those things, or three or four, like, why not do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, you're kind of just stacking the deck. And I think, we've kind of touched on this now, and obviously I think we're all in agreement that, being physically fit and being, it helps you to be attractive on the inside as well. But I want to kind of get back to the whole idea of building a seduction persona here. And in particular, adopting new beliefs and new attitudes, new behaviors that can help you. So how do you identify, Frank, some of the things that, maybe aren't working for you, but are at the unconscious level that you have, let's say you're just running a pattern and you don't actually realize that you're self-sabotaging yourself. How do you become aware of something like that?
Okay, self-sabotaging is a whole other beast. So let's start with the building of seduction persona. If you've ever caught yourself saying, gosh, I wish I knew how to fill in the blank. Wow, look at those people. They're having fun. I wish I could blank. Every time you say, I wish I could, that's signaling that you're not happy with where you are, and that there's a behavior that you can adopt that could get you to where you want. What that behavior is, I don't know. This is where you have to go into the real world and experiment. One of the benefits of the system that I followed is that for 2.5 years, I experimented with behaviors, everything from trying palmistry to showing up a place with a homemade bottle of wine, seeing how that was going to affect me, to letting a woman do the dishes for me, to not letting a woman do the dishes for me. I experimented with so many different behaviors to figure out what works for me. And I want to make it very clear that all the stuff that works for me, it's not necessarily going to work for somebody else. Somebody else may have to calibrate the things that they have going for them that I don't. Just like they'll have to calibrate for things that I've got going for me that they don't. So anytime you start identifying those situations, again, you go back to the chart with the 3 columns on it. First column, pick a particular situation that you are unhappy in where you've said, I wish I could. Then in the second column, write down exactly what it is you do or don't do. Identify it. Say, well, this is what, my name is Frank, and when I'm in an X situation, this is what I do, and I'll write that down. And the third column is where you're experimenting with different behaviors.
I think
so. You would come. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention, and maybe you can just touch on this once you finish your point, is so what if you're in a situation where your new behavior, your current situation is you're at the coffee shop, and what you currently do is you see a cute girl and you don't talk to her, even though you really want to, and then you kick yourself for not talking to her. And the new behavior that you want is that you want to be able to approach her confidently, have something easily roll off your tongue, and be able to get a phone number and engage in a good conversation. If that's the behavior that you want, but you don't necessarily know how to actually do that, or you don't necessarily know if you're going to have the confidence to do that, even if you want to, how do you start to instill those things?
Okay, well, first of all, you set up too big a goal in that behavior change. I mean, you're going from sitting there kicking yourself to saying, okay, well, I'm going to go there, I'm going to get a phone number, I'm going to have a great conversation. Well, you don't control what's going to happen. You don't control whether or not you're going to get that phone number. That control, that type of marketing, whatever, that's an illusion. Here's what you do control. You control whether you stay sitting down or whether you go up and say hi and start a conversation. That's what you control. You got to give it something specific. So what I would do, if let's say you were a client of mine and that's the situation you were in, I would say, okay, what is something specific that you could get up, walk over to her and say, pick one specific introduction. What would it be?
What are you drinking?
What are you drinking? Okay, let's go with that. So the next time you're in that situation, your job is to go up to her and say, what are you drinking? Now, you're already thinking, wow, but I got to get into a conversation. I got to get a phone number. All that extra pressure you're putting on yourself is going to deter you from ever approaching at all. You start small. You chunk it down. You start off by going up to her and saying, hey, what are you drinking? And if she says, oh, I'm drinking a hot chocolate with whipped cream foam. Great. Now you know that. You say, thanks a lot. Great talking to you. And you go back and sit down and continue. Now you're thinking...
I just say, Frank, I imagine the idea is to condition this behavior over and over again until you no longer have to think about it. You just automatically do it. Would that sort of be the idea?
Exactly. What you're doing is you're instilling a new habit to simply be able to go up to somebody that you want to approach and say hello. Now, the idea of, well, you got to make sure you say this, you got to make sure you say that, that's putting so much pressure on the guy. Most people fail when they're doing these approach drills because they have somebody else there pumping them up, and they'll do that for a couple of days, and then they go right back into their, shells. And it becomes even harder for them to break through that shell again. One of the things that I teach, and this is a bit different from what other people do, approaching is the last thing you do. Approaching for me is the last thing that I teach. And I learned that the hard way because there's a lot of very broken people out there, and the last thing I'm going to do is encourage a broken person to infect anybody else with their brokenness by uncalibrated approaches. I would focus on things like, okay, in that particular goal, again, if you were a client of mine, I'd say, okay, you want to learn how to have a conversation. Well, let's focus on your conversation skills. Let's focus on your storytelling skills. So one of the things that I would assign you as a homework assignment is I want you to write down a list of your top 10 best childhood memories. Then I want you to give me a list of your top 10 peak life experiences. Mm-hmm. Then I want you to list 10 things you love the most. It's like a favorite day of the week, favorite month, favorite season. Then I want you to make a list, 10 things you hate the most, day of the week you hate the most, season you hate the most, month you hate the most. That's 40 topics of conversation right there.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting because even just to hear you bring that up, you know, I actually have to physically think of 10 things in each one of those categories. And it's funny because I got like my first response, you know, for the stuff that you hate, it's actually the answer actually comes to you easier because everybody knows what they hate really well.
That's right.
Yeah.
People tend to focus on the things they hate more than the things they like. And this is one of my frank conspiracy theories. Society doesn't want you to be happy because happy people don't tend to spend money. Society wants you to be miserable so that you have pain to walk away from and so that you'll go out and spend money on things that you think will make you happy.
Well, that's how the news has stayed in business for this long.
You got it.
That's certainly true.
So let's look at, again, favorite childhood memory, right? Mark, what's one favorite childhood memory you have?
Dancing to Michael Jackson.
Dancing with Michael Jackson?
Not with. Whoa, that could be dangerous.
That could be really dangerous.
Okay, so dancing to Michael Jackson. All right, Mike, what's a favorite childhood memory you have?
I would have to say when I got my brand new red tricycle.
All right.
Okay.
The first day.
All right.
All right, so now you each have a story about your favorite childhood memory. What I would want you to do is I would want you to write out that story in the form of no longer than a paragraph. Just get the ideas out about why that's your favorite. We're not going to do that in this conversation. There's no time. But that would be the idea. Now do that for everything on those 40 items on those 4 lists that I gave you. So that the next time you approach a girl and say, hey, what are you drinking? And she says, oh, it's a hot chocolate with whipped cream. There's going to be something in that response that somehow relates to one of the 40 friggin' stories you sat down to write out so that it's there for you to remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny because even when you mentioned that example, the first thing that popped in my head was a story about, you know, finishing up snowboarding, coming back to the chalet and having some hot chocolate with whipped cream, which is probably the exact story that I would tell if that was her answer.
Exactly, and that exactly. So right now, with these homework assignments and preparing for that one interaction, you have a story ready to go. So she says it's hot chocolate with cream. You've got one of those stories. Wow, peak life experiences. You know what that reminds me when I was at the chalet? Boom, boom. Yeah. You've just got a conversation going. Yeah. And you didn't start with, hi, you're really pretty. I want to meet you. I'm looking to put pressure on you and creep you out. You actually got into a nice conversation.
Yeah.
And now you're going to find out. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I really like this because, you know, in terms of being prepared, it's obviously so important. It's, you know, it's the Scouts model, if you will. And a lot of the times we think being prepared is having a line. But, you know, if it's even being prepared, it's really just about knowing those core stories and knowing those things about yourself that are interesting so that you can just naturally, situationally rock into something when the moment calls for it. That's going to be so much more effective and so much more authentic than using, you know, asking her what her opinion is and using some canned line.
You got it. This is why if someone is a student of mine, within 5 years, they either get their goal and I never hear from them again because I attend their wedding and they're happily ever after, or after a couple of years, they realize, wow, game wasn't my problem. I need real therapy. And then they go off and find a real therapist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So guys out there, I'd really encourage you to make these lists. It's something that I'm definitely going to do as well because I'm sure you can see the power in it. So, Frank, what else? Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to follow up there. Once you have all of those stories written out, you're not doing that so that you can impress the girl. You're doing that to remind yourself. Off the top of your head, you might think of 1 or 2 childhood memories. But, I mean, the fact is you have probably a few dozen. You just look for the top 10. We all have stories. And when you tell a story of your childhood memory or peak life experience, she is likely going to get into her best childhood memory or peak life experience. And you've got a very positive communication going on there.
Mm-hmm. Mark,
now, in terms of... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mark, I know for you, you ask guys a lot, particularly what they like about themselves. And actually drawing that out and writing that down and utilizing that and just simply being aware of it and the power of that in terms of entering into communication and knowing some of the positive qualities that you have in yourself.
Yeah. I mean, you made a point earlier that when Frank asked you about, a bunch of things, 10 lists, this, that, and the other thing, the one that came easiest to you was 10 things you don't like.
Right.
And it's one of the conditions that we've been conditioned that we always have. There's stuff. I think there's two things that society conditions us to. And one of them is that when you say you like something about yourself, you're called arrogant or conceited or, you shouldn't do that. You're supposed to be humble. And I think people, guys in particular, we have this mishmash of what masculinity is or what a man should be, what we can't versus who we are. And it's like, well, the fact that I like this about myself and I tell you doesn't make me cocky, doesn't make me arrogant, doesn't make me a bad guy. And we have to get into the habit of talking about the things that we like about ourselves because we are slowly programming ourselves to dislike ourselves. So if you don't like you, why should anybody else? Age-old adage. And the other thing I always talk about with the guys is they tell me, well, I can't think of something I like about myself. Well, if you can think about things that I can't think of things that I want to change about myself or that I can actively, seek and find that I want to change, that I can change about myself. But if you can find something that you don't like, all it is looking at the flip side of that. And then there's going to be something else there that you can A, control and change, or B, that is good about you, and that's the thing is being in touch. I mean, you said it, like if you can be in a moment, and Frank has an amazing exercise here for everyone that teaches you going back to, if you know who you are, and that's what these stories are about. They're not about, like Frank said, they're not about impressing a girl. They're about reminding you of who you are, what makes you happy, what makes you great, what makes you enjoy what you do. And if you remember those stories in a moment where a girl says something or a guy says something to you while you're trying to sell something, and again, this is applicable to life, but we're talking about a woman says something and says, hey, it's about hot chocolate. All of a sudden you're in the moment and you're not trying to think, well, okay, now I say this to her and then I say this. I've never had a conversation with someone where I've thought about what I'm saying. I'll be very honest with you. It's once you know who you are, once you understand the things that you like about yourself, what makes you powerful as an individual, you're going to say something that's going to catch them it's going to be on point. And even if it's not smooth, it's going to resonate with her because it's real and because you're in the moment with her and because you're feeling her vibe and she's seeing that you're giving a piece of you, a good piece of you to her.
The only thing that I would like to add to that is that the end of the journey is a time for spontaneity. Because at that point, you've already gone through this process of internal learning. So what comes off as spontaneity is actually a result of years of getting to know yourself. The mistake that some guys make initially is that they want to be spontaneous now. They say, oh, I want to be spontaneous, I want to be outrageous. The fact is, until you know what your own boundaries are, until you know what it is you like and don't like, until you figure out those things, being spontaneous, A, is not going to come naturally, it's not going to come easily, and B, is probably not a good idea because you might end up going into a direction that, wow, I really regret.
Not comfortable with, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
This is not an overnight thing. This is a major life change. When I see some of these younger guys coming into the study of game, I pity them because they're not even getting the opportunity to go into life and learn this stuff on their own or even trying. They're coming here saying, okay, I'm just going to follow somebody else's stuff, and they end up doing things that are going against some of their own value systems because somebody else suggested that they should. And we're dealing with a younger guy who has no backbone, no base philosophies to guide him, of his own accounting, of his own, let me try this for myself and see if this actually works for me. You're getting a lot of guys being taken advantage of. I think it's kind of disgusting. You know, and in terms of liking yourself, if you're having a hard time coming up with a list of things you like about yourself, break that down. Well, one of the exercises I have in my book is called Why the Man is the Prize. And like I suggest things like, okay, you're going to come up with 25 qualities about yourself that you like, but I'll break it down for you. You have to come up with 3 qualities that your friends would say you have, because that's an easier list to do. Now you want to find, let's say, 5 qualities that would appear on your resume that you want a potential employer to know. Now give me another 5 qualities that you would want a potential lover in the future to know. Then you want, let's say, another 5 things that, 5 achievements in your life. 5 material possessions that you have access to or that you own. You know, the fact that you're a man should be on that list. The fact that you're sexually attracted to women should be on that list. Mm-hmm. Learn to embrace your own sexual orientation instead of being a self-hating man. And with each one of those things, guess what? There's a story you could tell.
You know, just kind of getting back to one of the points that Mark made, and I know you probably have quite a few thoughts on this. Maybe we, can just get the short version, because I'm sure this is a whole conversation on its own. But in terms of, what a man should be and our ideas right now about, who we should be as men and how we should act and how we should present ourselves. What are some of your thoughts on that, Frank?
Okay, when I went through that process of what it means to be a man, after a number of years of experimenting with different behaviors and different definitions, my definition of a man is decisive. So when someone says, what does it mean to be a man? I say a man is decisive. He's somebody who can make a decision, knows why he's made the decision. Now, are there other definitions of being a man? Absolutely. Are they different from mine? 100%. Are they right and I'm wrong? No. Am I right and are they wrong? No. I have found a definition that works for me because that's the definition that I can respect, I can follow up with, and that is in line with my own other base life philosophies. Mm-hmm. For somebody else, being a man might be something like, being committed to a certain cause.
Being a provider.
Being a provider. Being a good father, even if the kid's not yours. Mm-hmm. You understand? It's you got to remember, a man's self-image or identity, whatever terminology you want to use, it's very subjective. It's when a man doesn't live up to his own image of being a man. That's where he feels the guilt and the shame. But a man doesn't feel guilt and shame when he's not living up to someone else's expectations of him. It's when he doesn't live up to his own expectations of being a man. Where guys get really screwed up, if they don't have a set definition of what it means to be a man, all they have is other people's expectations. And you can never feel anything but guilt and shame trying to live up to someone else's expectations of you.
Yeah, Mark, would you have anything to add on that?
I mean, Frank hit it real clean. Being a man, someone says to me, well, what's your definition of being a man, or what does a man do? Everything I do is what a man does because I am my definition of being a man. And that's what it has to be for each individual. You have to be able to sit down and, I definitely echo what Frank is saying, where you have a lot of cats coming in and saying, man, I want to learn game, instead of saying, man, I want to live life. And they come in and they want to, learn all the rules or how someone else did everything, instead of, and this is a problem with modeling that a lot of people have. They miss what modeling, I think, is really about. Modeling is not trying to be somebody else, but modeling goes to a much deeper level of trying to figure out why somebody that you admire, or someone, someone who holds qualities that you admire, why they do what they do, so you can fit that into your own belief system and do it too. So it doesn't mean that you have to walk like I have people I model. It doesn't mean that, as a basketball player coming up, I wanted to be like Kobe Bryant, he's my favorite player, greatest player in the NBA. I didn't say, man, I'm going to shoot like Kobe because that'll make me like Kobe, because I'm not gifted with the same gifts that Kobe has. But what I could study from his game was, why does he do what he does? How did he get as good as he does? Okay, so he does this. Oh, he practices because he believes there's nothing purer than the game. So you have to get better at your game. He believes, and started to see what he believed, and I could institute that into my own beliefs where they fit. And the same thing. So you go back to what's being a man. Well, you figure out, you look at a bunch of people, and, you know, it sucks that a lot of guys, particularly, you know, in my demographic, didn't grow up with fathers. And so you have a lot of guys who have a falsified image of what being a man is. They have this image of, you know, whether it be music videos or movies or porn, which is a real sad state. But you have a lot of guys that I talk to and work with, and they think they need to be like porn star dudes. And I'm like, word? Like, that's what your definition of being a man is? And it's finding something that works for you, finding, you know, whatever qualities that define masculinity to you, that you can live with, that you could be proud of, because at the end of the day, you're the only one that has to judge it and feel good about it and live up to it, you know. And you know, it goes to the point is, are you living up to your own expectations? And so many times we're caught up into living up to everyone else's expectation. Well, he expects me to be this. He expects me to be this. She expects me to be that. Nah. What's your expectation of yourself? And a lot of guys don't even sit down and think about that. They don't even sit down and write that down. We're too busy doing everything else and not busy enough figuring out self. And so, you know, again, you ask, well, what's my definition of masculinity? I mean, I could go into detail, but I won't. I am a man, and what I do each and every day is what my definition of a man should and does do, because I am being who I am set out to be, because I can't be anything else but the man that I am.
There's something I'd like to add to that you had mentioned, one of the challenges of modeling. Mm-hmm. One of the things I teach my students is to beware your mentors. Just because you might want to model somebody for one aspect of their life, you have to be mindful that just because you may look up to them in that area, that doesn't mean that they're going to be a really wonderful person and the person you should be following in all areas of your life.
Absolutely not.
This is why on my Building a Seduction Persona chart, I don't look for the person. I look for the specific behavior. Because in your case, okay, you said that you admired Kobe Bryant as a basketball player. And you took on some of his beliefs, or you took on some of his specific behaviors. That's great.
No, not his behaviors. Then that's what I'm saying. It's when you take on someone's behavior, that'll get you in trouble. You know, it's deeper than that. He's taking it. What I did was, with that particular example, was try to, for me, is figure out, why does he do, based on all the resources I have. Okay, I get to listen to him talk. I get to talk to him. I get to read about him. So what is the resonating factor? Why does he do what he does? Okay, he practices a lot, but why? What's his drive? What is his belief? What is driving him to do it? And I think that's way deeper than what does he do? He takes jump shots. That's pretty simple.
Okay, well, hold on. When you're talking about his beliefs, you're not taking on every single belief he has.
Absolutely not. You're
taking on the specific beliefs in a very specific context.
I'm talking about Kobe Bryant, the basketball player, how he became so good.
Okay. And you don't see that emulating some of his behaviors as a basketball player would also factor into that?
I see emulating his belief starting there and then moving your way up. And what I'm saying is, Frank, and it's not that all I'm saying is this, is that a lot of people get caught up in trying to copy behaviors, and they don't try to figure out what's deeper than that. And if you step into anybody's world and try to copy their behavior only without an understanding of why they're doing something, you're going to miss a key part in modeling and making yourself being able to take on the characteristic in your own holistic way that you can take it on, if you went a little deeper.
Okay, see, I come from the other side of this. I start with the behaviors, and once you experiment with the behaviors, the beliefs will grow from that. And the reason is, it's almost impossible to adopt a brand new belief system if your current belief is very entrenched. It doesn't matter how many times you tell a guy, you got to be confident, you got to feel confident, you got to like yourself, you got to have some self-esteem, if the person really hates themselves.
Sure, confidence is not a belief, though. Confidence is a behavior. There's a belief that comes from something deeper than that.
Confidence
Right.
is a
So
result.
that's my point. So that's the thing that you're not trying to emulate someone's confidence, but I'm trying to figure out, why is that guy confident? Why is Kobe confident to take the game-winning jumper? Well, because he took 500 of the exact same shot in practice. Well, why did he take those 500 shots in practice? Because he wants to make sure that he's comfortable at any situation to play in a game, to take a shot, whether it's for the game or whether it's the first shot of the quarter, because he understands the purity of the game. Okay. So now I'm taking those shots and working on that turnaround fadeaway jumper, not because I want to be like Kobe and work on that turnaround fadeaway jumper, but because I understand that now it might come up in a game and the game might be on the line. And if I'm comfortable taking that shot, it's no big deal taking that shot as opposed to any other shot, because I've taken hundreds and hundreds of them.
Which is kind of like the chicken before the egg or the egg before the chicken type of thing, because if the behavior is taking the 500 shots, then the belief comes out of that behavior of the confidence and the inner knowing that you can make that shot because you've created the behavior. So I think the point is that you need to model behaviors, the positive ones, as well as the beliefs and as well as the actual physical actions of those behaviors in order to fully take on something new into your persona.
The only thing I could add to that is, whether you start with a belief and you can experiment with it, I think more people struggle with that. But if you're able to do that, then you're already a little bit more advanced.
Oh, for sure, without a doubt.
Yeah, there are some people who need to do the behavior first, and from the behaviors, adopting the behaviors, even if they don't believe in it, new beliefs can stem from that.
Absolutely.
It's when those new behaviors create the new beliefs, or the new beliefs have behaviors to back them up. That's when those new beliefs become entrenched into the person you are and become part of, instead of just being a seduction persona, your seduction persona and you actually start to merge, where your seduction persona believes and it behaves and gets the results that you would want.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're talking about here is the whole Kanai idea from Tony Robbins, right? The constant never-ending improvement. It's always that, being in a social situation, calibrating other people and seeing, behaviors and beliefs that are more effective than the ones that you currently hold and adopting those and consistently wanting to do that, consistently wanting to change, consistently wanting to improve in any area in your life that is not where you want it to be. Always asking yourself that question. If you're saying, I wish I could, then you're asking yourself that question. Well, who already does what I want? Who already lives that life? Who already is creating those things? And how can I take on their persona, their beliefs, their behaviors, the positive ones, and how can I make those my own so that I can now adopt those behaviors and I can now have those same successes? And I think that's really what it comes down to, is that instead of being stagnant and sitting in your room and playing World of Warcraft or, cruising Plenty of Fish, it's about, going out there and consistently improving and having the desire to improve as well.
I really want to add something here, just because you one key element you said that I really don't want it to get brushed over, and that is in an area you're not happy in. If it's an area in your life you're not happy in, then you must strive to improve. However, once you've reached a certain level of contentment in that particular area, the desire to improve there, I think, just becomes much more, becoming like a self-help junkie. You're going to get good at something at some point where, and I don't want to use the word coasting because it has such negative connotations. But if your goal was to create a multi-million-dollar company and you've done that, then creating a multi-billion-dollar company isn't necessarily going to give you that much more fulfillment. It's, I created the multi-million-dollar company, now I'm going to continue to run this multi-million-dollar company.
But that's not how we are able to live our lives. I mean, would you not agree, Frank? I mean, we're always striving for that next thing. We're
very goal oriented as people. We're built to be very goal oriented, and I think that's even when you said Tony's whole thing. Many people talk about it. You're satisfied, or you're feeling your best when you're going for something.
Listen, in my philosophy, if you're constantly going for something, even after you've achieved a certain level of success, if you're still striving and still constantly going for something, I still see that as part of society's way of saying you don't have enough to be happy. And I'm personally, my own attitude on this, and I know it differs from a lot of people, is that once you get that level, or that level in a certain part of your life where, okay, you've gotten it, now you can move on. The best example I could give on this is education. Once you finish your bachelor's degree in university, you could say, well, I'm going to continue going on to school, and I'm going to get a master's and get a PhD, and then I'm going to take a bunch of other courses because I want to constantly self-improve. But maybe to get at least, maybe all you need is that bachelor-level education, so you get that part of your life taken care of. Okay, I got my bachelor's, now I'm going to focus on other areas of my life because I've achieved my goals in this area of life, and I'm happy with that.
But Frank, one could easily argue that, all of us probably have some kind of self-development or self-help book on our nightstand, and once that one's done, we'll read another one, and we'll read another one, and we'll talk to our friends about it. So there is always that drive to learn more, to know more, to find easier ways to do things and to improve. I mean, that's why guys who started in game, let's say 10 years ago, who have been consistently good are still in game because they still have that desire, they still have that drive, and they're still trying to improve and refine their skills.
Guys who have been in game for 10 or 20 years, if they're still in game, they're either there because they're teaching and they're mentoring, or they haven't achieved whatever goal they set out to achieve. And I would look at that and say, okay, there's some level of unfulfillment there. Because, they're looking for, game has become their form of escapism.
I would have to disagree in terms of the fact that, any healthy individual, in concept-wise, and here's my take, is any healthy individual, that's part of being healthy, is where you reach one goal and you aim for another, or you go for something else. There's retired people who have done, there's people who could be retired, who I'm very blessed to be mentored by, and they could be retired. For instance, this one gentleman I'm thinking of, and he just can't retire. He retired for a few years and was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm going crazy, and went and started another company, and went not because of the money, but because there was a different goal involved and all. And I think what we're kind of saying, or what I'm kind of saying, is that yes, it's not about not being happy, but it's about, again, we say where you're striving to be better than you are, because in that pursuit, there's joy.
Would you at least look at the concept that it's okay to strive on to constantly be better, but be better if you're constantly working in the same area trying to be better?
Well, that's a different topic. Well, if you're working in the same area, then you miss something. If there's
that's my point.
Absolutely.
That, for me, as a guy studying game for 20 years. Listen, if I'm looking for the next tactic, the next thing to experiment with, this doesn't signal to me a guy who has it together. This signals to me a guy who still hasn't figured it out, because most guys who figured it out will get what it is they want, whether it's a certain type of relationship or a certain type of woman, or maybe a certain lifestyle. Once you've achieved that lifestyle, you're not looking to learn, how can I get a different lifestyle? How can I how can I augment the lifestyle I have now? If you're trying to augment the lifestyle, which is what usually gets guys into the game, it means you're not happy with where you are.
Right.
Well, and I guess that's how you define game as well. I was thinking it more as, as being a macro subject in regards to, even what we're talking about now. And, just the idea that not only improving in your dating and your ability to approach a girl, but also in your ability to foster loving relationships. To me, that's part of game as well. And, I just ended a long-term relationship, and now I'm back in the game, and I'm brushing up my skills again, so it's sort of this consistent flow. But I think the idea and the key point here is that no matter, improving consistently is something that is always going to be part of our goal as men, but I think what's important is that you're grateful and you're appreciative of where you're at now. Because if you're miserable with where you're at now, that's the kind of thing that's going to hold you back. That's the kind of thing that's going to get you down. You have to have a certain level of appreciation for where you're at in your life right now. Even if you want it, even if you have a desire to change and to improve, there's going to be, you're not living on the street. You've got some conversational ability. You can go out in public. I think just those things alone, we need to have a certain level of appreciation for, because if we don't, then we kind of get trapped in that cycle of, not really.
Cycle of loathing.
Cycle of loathing, essentially. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Absolutely. I mean, you enjoy where you're at because it allows you you're where you're at, and that's it's always a good thing to give thanks. It's always a good thing to give thanks.
It sounds like you're waging war in your room. What are you doing right now?
I just had a delivery of videotapes actually, and VHS tapes.
Do you have a VHS player?
I don't have a VHS player. An agent sent me VHS tapes. It's quite an interesting thing. So I just kicked them over, and the stack just went down. I didn't know if you could hear it. I was like, damn!
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the life of Mr. Mark Sparks right here.
Yeah,
Stack of VHS tapes.
VHS. I get to watch cuts of VHS tapes. That means I gotta go get a VCR. But I got a Nintendo, so I got my 80s covered.
Do you still have to blow on the cartridges?
Dude, you always got to blow in the cartridges, but that's what makes Nintendo sick.
Does it get worse over time?
No, it's honestly, the game that played perfectly back in '88 plays perfectly right now, and the game that I had to blow in and push to the left in '88, I still have to push to the left now. Right. I think that's consistency at its best. That's a lesson for guys right there. Consistency. Stay consistent.
There we go. Well, we touched on some really great stuff today. Is there anything, Frank, that you wanted to add about creating a seduction persona?
We can talk about naming your seduction persona.
Giving it a name.
Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of a name, think of somebody you admire or think of a particular character trait that you want to embody. It's easier to give your seduction persona a name. That's what makes it a symbol. It makes it something a little bit intangible. And yeah, it's a little bit schizophrenic when you're dealing with, it's like building a new personality, another person inside you. Yeah, it can seem like that way. But when I was studying in drama therapy, one of the practices that we took on was using using theater practices as a means of therapy, where if someone, let's say, went through a particular crisis situation, maybe they were in mourning because, you're dealing with a young adult who recently lost their only parent. And it's like, okay, well, even you don't feel like getting up in the morning. Well, if you were playing a character, what would that character do in that particular situation? Well, that character would probably, pick a character. They say, okay, well, I'm going to name my character, and they picked a fictitious name, usually naming it after someone they admired or that they looked up to, that had the capacity to embody all these new behaviors. Well, your character is Johnny. Okay, well, what would Johnny do? Well, Johnny would probably get up out of bed even if he didn't feel like it. Okay, well, let's adopt that behavior, and then we would work to practice a theater experience, getting that person to get up and out of bed. Same idea with creating a seduction persona. You want to give it a name, so this way, when you're in a situation and you don't know what to do, you can think, what would my seduction persona do? But you give it a name, so it actually makes it seem like a real person. You're a real person. You can connect with that. My seduction persona's name was Brother Kermit. So when I got into a situation and I said, what would, here's my situation. I'm sitting here, there's a girl next to me on the subway. She's reading a magazine. I can see what the article is, and she's highlighting a line in it. Wow, I'm actually interested. I know what that article's about. Oh, Frank, what would Frank do? Well, Frank would sit here. He doesn't want to say anything. He doesn't want to bug her. I mean, what if she says, what if she turns out to be really mean and nasty? What would Brother Kermit do? Brother Kermit would say, are you reading that article?
Amen.
And that's where it starts. That's where it starts.
Yeah.
So the example that you brought up earlier, you're sitting in a coffee shop, you see a cute girl there, you want to approach her, you don't know what to do, and you start writing down these specific behaviors. Once you give your name, your seduction persona a name, you can say, well, let's see, Mike is nervous here about approaching a girl in a coffee shop. What would insert seduction persona name do? Well, insert seduction persona name would go up to her and say, what are you drinking? And whatever it is she says, relate it to one of the stories you've already prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of time, those stories that you have to spend time preparing now become second nature and become more spontaneous later on.
Well, Frank, I want to thank you so much for joining us. We're just about at time now. Guys out there, if you want to find anything more about Frank, you can hit up www.franktalks.com.
Check it out.
Related to Frank is there. It's a great site. Tons and tons of material on there. And, of course, Mark Sparks, you can hit up through the men's room or marksparks.com. And you can always email me at mike@mensroom.tv. Guys, thank you very much for listening to the call. This is July 2010. And
mensroom.tv. Find me at not mensroom.com, y'all. Don't go to mensroom.com.
No, you don't want to go there. I mean, you can go there so you know what we're talking about.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the book I'm a Man, That's My Job, The Philosophy of a Seducer. Your inner game is as unique and personal as your signature or your fingerprints. This book provides you with the means to create your own seduction persona. By this, learn what it means to be a man and attract the women you want. Learn about how men and women think differently and how to take the lead in a relationship. This book is for you at franktalks.com.